They thought humiliating me at my own daughter's wedding would break me. They didn't realize it would set me free. Stick around till the end. This story will make you question what it really means to be a mother. Subscribe for more powerful stories of betrayal, family, and unexpected revenge. I stood at the altar, clutching my daughter Emily's bouquet, smiling through the nerves that come with a wedding day. I was 72 years old, retired after 40 years of sewing in a small Chicago workshop. Half of my life savings, $10,000, had gone into making this day perfect for her. The flowers, the music, the white dress, all of it was my gift to Emily. Just as the priest prepared to continue, Mark, the groom, leaned in and whispered something into her ear. Emily's face turned pale, then icy. In front of 90 guests, she snapped at me with a voice I'd never heard from her before. "You're ruining our moment. Get out." The church went silent. My heart cracked in my chest. But something inside me, a voice I hadn't listened to in decades, whispered, "Hold your head high." I didn't make a scene. I walked to the back of the church, pulled out my phone, and calmly told the reception manager, "Cancel everything, right now. I'm not paying for another thing." The whispers behind me blurred as I stepped into the sunlight. My neighbor Nancy, who'd stormed out in tears, hugged me tight. "Linda, sorry. Emily has no heart," she whispered. I wasn't alone, but I knew my role as the ever-devoted mother had ended at that church door. My name is Margaret Turner, and if you'd told me 5 years ago that my life would change this way, I'd have laughed. I grew up in a small Midwestern town, the eldest of 7 kids. At 18, I moved to Chicago to build a life. I met my late husband Henry at a textile factory. We married young. He worked as a mechanic, and I sewed at home. We didn't have much, but we had love. We raised 2 children, Emily, our firstborn, and David, 3 years younger. I was the heart of the home, up at 5 a.m. making breakfast, sewing late into the night, taking the kids to church on Sundays while Henry rested. 8 years ago, Henry died of a sudden heart attack. He was only 54. Losing him felt like losing half my soul. Emily moved back home temporarily after high school to help me, but temporary turned into years. By 25, she was still living with me, dating Mark, who worked in a government office. When Emily announced their engagement, I was overjoyed. I sold my 2 beloved industrial sewing machines, my livelihood, to give her the wedding she dreamed of. When I handed her the money, she hugged me with tears in her eyes and said, "You're the best mom in the world. I'll never forget this." The weeks before the wedding were magical. Choosing the dress together, tasting cakes, arranging flowers. It reminded me of when she played bride with bedsheets. I felt needed, important, loved. Mark's parents lived in a wealthier neighborhood. At dinner, his mother Patricia was polite but distant. His father was warm. Mark spoke about modernizing traditions, dismissing old customs. I brushed it off. Kids always want to do things their way. The wedding morning was perfect. Blue skies. Emily glowing in her dress. Me in my navy blue outfit, proud. The ceremony went smoothly, until the photographs. When the photographer suggested a family photo including me, Mark interrupted, "Better just us. We're a new family now. We don't need pictures with the past." It stung, but I stayed silent. At the reception, things got worse. My reserved seat beside Emily at the main table was quietly moved aside to make room for Mark's godparents. Emily's quick excuse, "You understand, right, Mom?" cut deeper than she knew. Then came the dance. First Emily and Mark, then Emily and me, then Mark and Patricia. Next should have been my dance with the groom. Instead, Mark grabbed the microphone. "We're changing some outdated traditions. There will be no mother-in-law dance. It's time to leave behind unhealthy dependencies between mothers and children." Every eye turned to me. Emily took the mic and echoed him. "Mom has always been emotionally dependent. It's time for me to grow up." The words sliced through me. I, who had worked, sacrificed, and given everything, was being publicly shamed as emotionally dependent. My legs shook, but I stood up calmly. I called the reception manager in front of everyone. I'm the one paying for this event. Cancel the music, cake, open bar. I want the refund calculated immediately. Emily ran to me, panicked. Mom, what are you doing? Exactly what you said. I'm living my own life, starting now. I walked out of that hall with my head high. Daniel followed, stammering excuses, but I didn't let him soften what had been done. Outside, Nancy offered me a ride home. I refused. I needed to be alone. That night, in my quiet kitchen, I stared at the walls Henry and I had built our lives in. For the first time in decades, I asked, who am I, if not their mother? No sewing machines. No husband. A daughter who saw me as a burden. I cried until my chest ached. But when Sunday came, a new thought emerged. Maybe, just maybe, this humiliation was the door God closed so I could finally open another one. The next morning, the phone rang. It was Emily. Her voice was shaky, unlike the defiant one from the wedding. Mom, we need to talk. I spent the morning cleaning, remembering the years I had poured into her life, the nights of bronchitis when I held her through coughing fits, the sneakers I worked overtime to buy, the gold chain I sold for her first semester of fashion school, which she later quit. Every sacrifice replayed in my mind like a film reel. That afternoon, I arrived at their apartment. Mark opened the door awkwardly. Emily sat me down with coffee and a carefully rehearsed speech. She and Mark explained that they had talked about my role and decided on new boundaries. You've always been too present, Mark said. I've depended on you too much, Mom, Emily added. They listed rules: no more financial help, scheduled visits once a week, only real emergencies would justify contact. Emily even suggested therapy, not for them, but for me, to learn how to let go. I sat silently, realizing this wasn't a conversation, it was a declaration. They had decided my place in their life without asking me. When I asked what would happen if I didn't accept, Emily answered softly, then we'd have to distance ourselves even more. There it was, the threat, wrapped in polite words. I left that apartment more broken than after the wedding. On the bus ride home, I stared out the window, wondering if other mothers were also seen as emotional burdens. But deep down, something was shifting. If my children wanted boundaries, they would get them. Not on their terms, on mine. The days after that conversation felt endless. Emily didn't call, Mark didn't visit. The silence was louder than any argument. My sewing machines were gone. My savings were dwindling. My pension barely covered groceries. For the first time in decades, I had no purpose, no routine, and no one depending on me. Then came a knock at the door. It was Mrs. Gable, my neighbor down the street, holding a dress for her granddaughter's wedding. Margaret, could you hem this for me? No one sews like you. I had to admit something I never thought I'd say. I can't. I sold my machines. Her eyes widened. Why on earth would you do that? I gave a vague answer. I needed the money. Because how do you tell someone you gave up your livelihood to fund the wedding of a daughter who publicly humiliated you? That night, Nancy came over with 2 slices of pie and that knowing look she always wore when something serious was about to happen. Have you heard from Emily? Not a word, I said. Nancy hesitated. I'm going to say something you might not like. Maybe you loved them a little too much. I frowned. What do you mean? She reminded me of the time Emily was 15 and wanted to go to a party. I had driven her there, waited outside for hours, then drove her back home like a chauffeur. My girls took the bus, Nancy said. You wanted to protect her from everything, but maybe in doing that, you taught her she didn't have to protect herself. Her words stuck with me for days. A week later, at the grocery store, I ran into Patricia, Mark's mother. She gave me a practiced smile, the kind women in country clubs give to each other when they want to seem kind but keep their distance. Margaret, how are you? I'm well, I lied. She leaned in, lowering her voice. Daniel told me you had a very mature conversation after the wedding about family boundaries. I'm glad you all came to good agreements. Good agreements. That's what they called publicly humiliating me and handing me a schedule for visits like I was applying for a visa. I smiled politely. Yes, Patricia. Very mature. By the time I got home, my hands were shaking, not from anger but from clarity. I had spent decades being available for everyone else. It was time, terrifyingly, finally, to be available for myself. That night, I made a decision. I was going to step away, not just emotionally, but physically. I remembered my cousin Laura, who lived in a quiet coastal town in Florida. She'd been widowed around the same time as me, but had chosen a different path. She took a job caring for an elderly couple by the beach. She always said Florida gave her a second life. I called her for the first time in years. Margaret. What a surprise, Laura, I think I need a change. I told her everything, the wedding, the machines, the boundaries, the silence. She didn't interrupt once. When I finished, she said, "Come here, there's work for women like us. Good pay, good people, and you deserve a new start." At first, the idea sounded insane. Sell my house? Move states at 72? Start over? But as the days passed, it started sounding less like insanity and more like freedom. I called a real estate agent. He walked through the house, the one Henry and I had built our lives in, and said, "This could sell fast if priced right." 3 months, he estimated. 3 months to dismantle a lifetime. Before I could talk myself out of it, I placed the for sale ad. The next morning, I called David. My younger child had always been calmer, more grounded. He visited that afternoon, sitting across from me with that quiet seriousness that reminded me so much of Henry. "Mom," Emily told me what happened. "And? I think she was wrong to humiliate you like that. But I also think maybe she wasn't wrong about some things." Hearing that from him stung, but he explained the times I'd worried more about their problems than they had themselves. The way I'd solved things before they even tried. "Mom, maybe Emily's right that you need to build your own life now. But she's wrong about the way she handled it. That wasn't love. That was cruelty." I sat there absorbing his words. He wasn't attacking me. He was holding up a mirror. Over the next few weeks, I began cleaning out the house. Every drawer held pieces of a life I had built for others. Baby clothes, photo albums, old school projects. It was both painful and liberating. A young couple came to see the house. They loved it instantly. 6 weeks later, we signed the preliminary contract. The clock was ticking. Then something unexpected happened. Emily showed up. She didn't knock. She used the key I had given her years ago. I was in the kitchen, wrapping dishes in newspaper, when she walked in and froze at the sight of the boxes. "What is all this?" "I'm moving," I said evenly. "Moving? Where?" "Florida." For a second, her confident mask slipped. Her voice trembled. "You sold the house? 3 weeks ago." She sat down slowly, as if the room had tilted. "Why didn't you tell me?" "Because you made it clear you wanted boundaries. I thought this fit perfectly. But to Florida, it's beautiful there." "I have a job waiting." "A job?" She sounded almost offended. I told her about selling my machines to fund her wedding. Her face crumpled. "You what?" The 10,000 had to come from somewhere. She covered her face, her voice cracking. "Why didn't you tell me?" "Because I didn't want you to feel guilty on your special day." For the first time in weeks, Emily wasn't the icy adult reciting Mark's rules. She was my little girl again, confused, overwhelmed, scared. "You can't go, Mom." "Why not?" Because this is your house. You raised us here." "I need you." Those last 3 words froze me. I need you. The same daughter who called me emotionally dependent in front of 90 people was now saying she couldn't let me go. She started to cry. "Mark convinced me that you never let me grow, that I needed to pull away to become independent. But I don't even know how to be an adult without you. I don't know how bills work. Or cooking. Or fixing anything. I've been pretending." I sat beside her. For the first time in a long time, we spoke honestly. I admitted my fear of being useless after Henry died. She admitted her fear of growing up without me. It wasn't pretty. It wasn't rehearsed. It was raw. Mark came home mid-conversation. Emily stood firm for once, explaining that she wanted a closer relationship with me, not one built on control, but on honesty. Mark surprised me by apologizing. I didn't understand families like yours. Mine was cold. I thought closeness meant weakness. I was wrong. He offered to buy me new sewing machines. Emily begged me to stay. We want you here. Not to fix everything, just to be here. I asked for time to think. That night, sitting among half-packed boxes, I realized this was no longer about Emily's approval or Mark's apology. It was about me. Did I want to stay out of fear, or did I want to leave out of courage? I called Laura. "Cousin," she said, "maybe you don't have to choose forever. Stay for a while, fix things, then come for a season. Life doesn't have to be all or nothing." For the first time, I considered that she might be right. The next morning, Emily showed up earlier than I'd ever seen her arrive anywhere, holding coffee and pastries like a nervous teenager before a big confession. "Have you thought about it?" she asked. I nodded. "Yes, I'll stay, but with conditions." Her eyes widened. "Anything." I held up one finger. "First, we're going to learn how to have an adult mother-daughter relationship. I won't smother you, and you won't run every time things get hard." "I accept," she said without hesitation. Second finger. "No more humiliations. If you ever feel like I'm too involved, you tell me, directly. No public speeches, no ambushes." "I accept that too." Third finger. "Next year I'm going to Florida for 3 months. Not to run away, to live my own adventure. And you're going to support me." Emily smiled for the first time in weeks. "Can we come visit?" "Of course," I said. We hugged, really hugged, for the first time since the wedding. It wasn't the desperate hug of a daughter clinging to her caretaker, or the resigned hug of a mother letting go. It was two women choosing each other, honestly, as family. That afternoon, I canceled the house sale and called Mrs. Patricia in Florida. She understood completely and promised to keep the job open for the following year. The next day, Mark and Emily delivered 2 brand-new industrial sewing machines. They were sleek, quiet, better than the ones I'd sacrificed for her wedding. "So you can start your new life," Mark said. "My new life," I repeated softly. The next 6 months changed everything. I started sewing again. Not out of financial desperation, but because I loved it. Sweet 16 dresses, school uniforms, little alterations. Every stitch was mine. The money I earned went into my account, for my future. Emily started visiting twice a week, not because she had to, but because she wanted to. Tuesdays we'd share coffee while I worked, Saturdays we went to the market together like we used to, but this time as equals. Mark softened too. At first, he visited stiffly, but eventually he started asking for advice, sharing work stories, even planning surprises for Emily with my input. He became the son-in-law I'd always hoped for, respectful, kind, but independent. David visited every Sunday. We'd share dinner with him and his partner, talking about his work, his plans, their future wedding. Our conversation shifted. No more emotional dependence, no more guilt. Just real connection. For the first time in decades, I had time for myself. I joined a knitting group at the community center. I started reading novels again. I met other women my age who were also rediscovering who they were outside of mom and wife. One of them, Mrs. Espinoza, told me something that stayed with me. For 30 years, I was just mom. When they all left, I didn't know who I was. So I took dance classes, volunteered, traveled. Every new thing I did showed me a piece of me that had been asleep. Her words resonated deeply. That was exactly what I was doing, waking up. The Florida trip was no longer a desperate escape. It became a planned adventure. Emily and David fully supported it. Emily even surprised me with a brand new navy blue suitcase. For your new chapter, she said, eyes shining. Aren't you sad I'm leaving? I asked. She thought about it. A little, but mostly I'm proud. You're braver than I ever realized. Brave. That word echoed inside me. For decades, I've been brave for them, working double shifts, raising kids alone, selling my tools to make her dream wedding happen. But this was different. This was bravery for me. 2 weeks before my trip, I woke up early, made my coffee, and realized something had shifted. I no longer had that constant buzzing anxiety, that feeling that my worth was measured by how much others needed me. I was Margaret Turner, a woman with 72 years of scars, stories, and strength. A mother, yes, but also a woman with her own dreams, Linda called one afternoon. Her voice was light. Mom, I just wanted to tell you, you've changed. You sound freer. I feel freer. Do you regret what happened at the wedding? She asked. I thought about it. I regret the pain, but not the result, she agreed. I think we needed to break before we could rebuild. She was right. That moment at the altar, the humiliation that almost destroyed me, became the spark that rebuilt our family on healthier, stronger ground. As I packed my suitcase for Florida, I slipped a single photograph into the front pocket. It was of Emily at age 10, hugging me with a toothy grin. On the back, in her childish handwriting, it said, "For the best mom in the world, I love you forever." I smiled. Not with bitterness, with peace. This wasn't the end of my story as a mother, it was the beginning of my story as me. They thought pushing me away would leave me broken. Instead, it set me free. Margaret's story is proof. It's never too late to rewrite your life, no matter your age. Follow for more powerful real-life stories of betrayal, growth, and unexpected revenge.